back, everyone, to another Hearts of Iron 4 Dev Diary overview. This time we're going to take a look at the Netherlands focus tree, which is actually good. Like, I like it. But it's not been a common theme for me, you know, with these paradox focus trees, but this one looks, quite good. So this is essentially for Man the Guns, and it's one of the unique focus trees that is coming with it, along with the reworks that they've already announced. You know, obviously, most importantly to the American one, but yes, there's also going to be, I believe, 2 unique focus trees, but I'm not too sure. Anyway, the theme for naval guns is naval warfare and democracies, as we've already seen many times. And I guess the most important one, that has to deal with both, the most important country that has to deal with both naval warfare and democracies, is the Netherlands. And in World War II, the Dutch did contribute quite a bit to the Allied cause with their fleets, both in terms of civilian navy, merchant navy, and in terms of military navies. And despite the fact that they got essentially taken over by Germany really quickly, in the end, the Dutch did prove to be relatively important. So it's also a country that has to deal with the new exiled government mechanics quite a lot, because, well, they are sent off to the Dutch East Indies historically, and also, well, you know, they have to come back from their colonies just like the French. So their mainland European exploits would not be terribly glorious, but the Dutch did contribute in other areas. It talks about resources, talks about the merchant marine, talks about the East Indies, which, well, we all know what happened to there. And yeah, I should have probably done this earlier. There we are. So, where the hell? What the fuck? Okay, here we are. So this is what I want to have so that I can look at it. Anyway, that's a big focus tree, you can see. That's, you know, Kaiserreich level of big, and so I like that. I like that especially because it has a lot of flavor to it and a lot of character, something which, for example, the American one did kind of lack. Anyway, so at the beginning you have a lot of very, very negative modifiers. You can see your national spirits there. There's the Queen, which gives you some stability. There's the Years of Crisis, which is minus 50% construction speed. Obviously, the crisis is the Great Depression. Neutrality. Shell-shocked spectator of the Great War is essentially, well, you know, everyone's kind of happy that they were not in the Great War because they saw that everyone else got destroyed. And it's actually very, very, very nasty. It's basically just like the victors of the Great War, except it's probably even worse. The victors of the Great War obviously is the national spirit that the Great Britain and France have, and then you have weak government. So you have to solve all these problems to start off. If it's a very, very common start, for example in Kaiserreich, you know, you just get a lot of bad things thrown at you at the start. You have to slowly but surely solve them. It's an approach that hasn't really been done that much, actually, in normal Hearts of Iron 4. So, yeah, that's good that they're bringing it over, because it really does give you a little bit of extra, tension in the early years. So, you can reduce the Krisisjaren, little. Oh, by the way, I don't have a potato in my mouth, so I will not be able to pronounce Dutch correctly. So you need to abandon the gold standard and start to do some public works to defeat your Great Depression, obviously. So you have to adopt, you know, a bit of Keynesianism or Keynesianism. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. And then to avoid your bad modifier due to the spectator of the Great War, you have to overturn the military budget costs. So that's the center part of the focus tree, which leads off into the military line and into part of the economic line, which is also connected to the colonial route. And they have obviously that exclusive choice you see there, either curtail colonial autonomy or the Zuiderzee works. So essentially, you get, you know, two choices. Either you buff yourself up in the mainland a lot, or you essentially say, well, it's kind of too likely that they're going to take over the mainland, and so we are going to take curtail colonial autonomy, which then allows you to annex the Dutch East Indies once you yourself are capitulated. So yeah, that's sort of your fallback plan, as opposed to trying to put all your eggs into one basket. So yeah, then you have a lot of decisions. You can obtain foreign colonial investment through, you know, unlocking them from the left branch of the focus tree. That's, you know, going to give you some nice bonuses to your West Indies and East Indies. So improving your resources and your economy. Then you have essentially all the line that buffs up the Indies in general. From both economic and defensive standpoints, you can see there is quite a lot of focuses, lots of resources, lots of free forts. So that's all very, very nice and dandy. You can expand the colonial army. And then at the end, there's the liberation focus, which we see a little bit further down once we talk about essentially the military mechanics, which is quite cool. So you're kind of supposed to, in this line, you're really thinking that the Germans or the British or whoever are gonna take over your mainland, and yeah, so you're just preparing for the worst, which is kind of good. It's a little bit like, you know, it's a little bit like China in a way, where you have all the focuses to redeploy westward. And yeah, it's kind of a nice thing. Nice change of theme from the normal Hearts of Iron form. In the meantime, in order to properly reduce the crisis years, you will have to focus on the mainland somewhat. So that's the center part. That sort of branches off into the industrial route, which is this one, you know, the Finish de Noordoostpolder, the Maastunnel, expand the Artillerierichtingen. Man, this is just impossible. And then you either you get some research, Phillips, and research and development, and again you have that exclusive choice. So that's essentially this part of it. You also have a pretty cool thing where you actually are doing essentially all the poldering around, reclaiming land from the sea, you know, like good Dutchmen. And yeah, so with those main focuses taken before the exclusive choice, you reduce essentially your crisis years penalty down to 10%, which is not as much as before. And you can get some factories along the way. At that point, you have to choose essentially. So either, you know, either you continue to build up in the mainland, and then you just essentially continue your poldering and continue your factory production, and then the choice is either between developing the sort of center cities, the Randstad, or the outlying provinces, outlying territories, the Zandstad, or again going to the colonies. So essentially the Randstad gives you more factories like immediately, whereas the Zandstad gives you more building slots. At least that's what the dev diary claims. Because essentially the first one is like the already developed heart of the Netherlands, whereas the second one is the outlier, Brabant and Friesland. If I did have a map, I guess this would be a little bit easier, right? But yeah, just, you know, you can probably just look it up. So essentially, like you're either developing the northeast and the southwest, or the center area that you see. And yeah, doing that, you lock yourself to continental play, and this might not be the best idea because, again, Germans, you know, might want to kill you, and the Japanese might want to kill you. You know, there's a lot of bad things that can happen. So you're pretty much got potential enemies on all sides. You have a colony in the east, right? So you could redeploy there, and yeah, with the focus that is exclusive there, continue the war in Batavia, you annex the Dutch East Indies. You can see here. So yeah, that's pretty useful. One thing that I don't really understand, though, if we look at it, is that it says your prerequisites for this is to have capitulated, and for the Dutch East Indies to be an integrated puppet with autonomy under 10%. So you need to have reduced their autonomy somewhat, but you also need to have capitulated. Does that mean that you can take focuses when you have capitulated? I guess this will be a feature with the new governments in exile. So yeah, that's kind of interesting. So yeah, then you annex there, you move your capital to Batavia, which today is Jakarta, and then if you can continue the struggle from the east, if you can survive Japan somehow, if you can build up your base in the East Indies and reclaim, reclaim your mainland, you can have the liberation focus, which is quite awesome. You can see you're sort of the phoenix rising from the ashes, and you get some amazing modifiers. And I hope that that's going to be similar for a lot of the governments in exile. That way, if you are doing a government in exile playthrough, you get a nice reward at the end for all your, for all your troubles. Whichever way you choose, you would do well you would do well to look at the sorry state of your military. Overturning the budget costs kicks off this branch, providing army experience and war support. From here, you can prepare the Inundation Lines, giving a passive spirit, increasing fort construction speed, but much more importantly, allowing you to intentionally flood parts of the country to face an invasion. And this is amazing. This kind of pisses me off that they didn't do it for China, because China did do flooding, intentional flooding. It's in fact quite famous that they kind of accidentally killed hundreds of thousands of Chinese doing it. The Yellow River intentional flooding. Anyway, so you can inundate the water lines, which is historically, one of the things that the Dutch do when they get invaded. They just break their own dikes and let everything be flooded. So obviously, to flooded provinces, you have minus 50% division speed, so clearly slowing down any invader, and then plus 50% defense speed and plus 20% entrenchment speed, which is absolutely amazing, obviously. So you can really make people pay for advancing into your territory, which is quite awesome. And you get that from the Prepare the Inundation Lines. There's two focuses: either protect against Britain or Germany is the greater threat. I'm not sure what they're going to do by themselves, but then they lead off to forts either towards the coastline and the border with France, or towards the east line, and then you can reduce your pacifism with some more decisions that we'll see down here. Lots of decisions, so some good interactivity. Inundating the land requires both a war and to keep full control of the Holland state for 14 days, so you're going to need to essentially defend yourself for those 14 days, and then you're going to have a big boost to it. So any invader is going to have to rush to get to Amsterdam really quickly. If any province is lost, it has no effect, thus making paradrops, as historically done by Germany during the invasion, to thwart this from happening, more of a requirement. If successful, the 4 provinces highlighted here will get the following modifier, and you can see that it's treated as essentially weather, a weather modifier, which is quite awesome. And together with making the absolute dik represented as a straight, the absolute dik is that thing to the top. Yeah, it's the land bridge. Represented as straight, properly reflecting how difficult it is to take 30-odd kilometer long and 90-meter wide causeway. So it's essentially like this big dike. This makes Fortress Holland far more difficult to take if properly prepared with defenses. I wonder if, like, the Scheldt estuary is as ridiculously weird as in real life, if they're gonna do anything strange with that. If you played Company of Heroes 1, you might know something about I'm just joking. If you've played Company of Heroes 1, you know what I'm referring to with Scheldt. But yeah, if you know a little bit of like Operation Market Garden, late World War II on the Northern Front, you probably know about the Scheldt estuary and how much of a pain it was for the Allies. Finally, any nation that controls the Holland state and is at war can flood these provinces, so it is entirely possible that the Germans can use it against the Allies after D-Day, as they did historically. And as a small nation, while adjusting the Afsluitdijk, I also added more victory points and notable cities in the Low Countries, so just more flavoring. I also really like how all of the nations that control Holland can do this, because it just makes more sense. And also, it is a kind of system that should be used in more different, you could say, more different countries, because just having like areas that have special effects once you take them, and then can tie into some decisions, you know, just generally improve the gameplay. Yeah. At the time, there was not only a fear of invasion from Germany, but also a preemptive British invasion, so you have to decide which one to defend against. Defending against the British will provide forts and provinces with a naval base, and the finisher establishes a small fort line against the Belgians. Protecting against Germany, however, focuses on building up to the historical Dutch waterline, establishing a fort line in the provinces that are also flooded through the inundation decisions, and adding forts to protect the dike to the north. So these defensive bonuses synergize heavily, but they do depend on being able to hold in long enough to flood the countryside, and they involve giving up entirely 2/3 of your country, essentially everything except for the Randstad. Whichever enemy you defend against, you will incur a sizable opinion penalty with them. Understandably so. And yeah, then you also have the decisions to remove pacifism. So yeah, you're gonna have to pay some stability to do that. It's a political power, which you see over there, and some nice flavor. Then you have the secret staff talks. Yes, you even have that. So essentially, with the budget cuts, once they're overthrown, that's, you know, all fine and dandy. But you can move down and say, we're going to take the secret staff talks, and that gives you the ability to essentially deal with all of the sides one way or the other. And yeah, that just sort of progressively moves up in importance of cooperation. So first is just, you know, you request some equipment, then you make combined staff plans, which as you can see gives bonuses to division defense on core territory. So that's essentially what the Dutch and the Belgians did with the French in the lead up to World War II. They kind of said, okay, well, you know, you're going to move up to here, we're going to move up to there, essentially that. And it didn't work out that well, but it could have. Intelligence, that exchange, evacuation of gold reserves. I'm guessing that that's gonna give you a buff in case you get capitulated by anyone else. So if you go into government in exile, you're gonna have some buffs because you've already evacuated your gold. And then share military knowledge. I don't see anywhere where that what that means, but that's fine. Historically, while the Dutch were officially neutral until they were invaded, they did see the looming threat of war and discussed potential military cooperation with Belgium and France. So yeah, that is the reasoning. Then you have a big air and naval stuff, but you know, nothing really too strange and out of the ordinary. And then you have the political line, which is actually the most straightforward. It's relatively simple. So you have one path that's fascist, and there you can either join Germany or be the Netherlands first, essentially. And in that you can go for the United Netherlands, but you're most likely just gonna die to Germany. And also with the Netherlands first, you can take back a bunch of places and even the colonies. It says the colonies from where the hell is it? God damn it. It's a little bit to the south. Yeah, anyway, there's just a bunch of things that you can do. Actually, let's just go over the diary and then I'll show you the focus tree. So yeah, essentially, at the beginning, you have to deal with your political crises, then you have to open your trade either to the British or to the Germans, or to maintain neutrality. Maintaining neutrality leads to either communism or non-aligned, And non-aligned is to have the queen essentially become a lot more, you know, influential. The communism is just essentially like decolonization. Red is the new orange is a funny focus name, but yeah, essentially, you know, you just decolonize and try to focus on Europe and to make socialism great. So that's just pretty normal stuff. You can either join the French, the French Commune if they form the Soviets, or you can do your own stuff. So it's just pretty standard stuff. In terms of the rest, yeah, essentially this is because historically both the Germans and the British were trying to get the upper hand in the Netherlands in terms of influence and in terms of trade. And yeah, essentially, like, this makes the Netherlands a just too valuable a place to leave neutral in the Second World War. So yeah, essentially, again, the Germans are trying to get through the British blockade, whereas the British are trying to, you know, keep the Netherlands in their own economic sphere and keep the Germans out. You can invest political power, and then as the British and the Germans, you can get some trade influence over the Netherlands, and then the trade influence leads into which one of the focuses you can actually take, which is kind of nice. So you're, in a way, you could say, kind of locked behind either the British or Germans being more interested in you. Yeah, essentially that's what it is. And that, yeah, you can also obviously influence yourself. So, you know, you can demand reduced trade with one or the other, and I'm guessing increased trade with one or the other. And yeah, in the end, all of that political power that is invested will be given to either the Dutch, the Germans, or the British, depending on which focus in the end is taken. So yeah, also I'm guessing that there's gonna be different economy laws. Like, I'm guessing that at the beginning you might have like no, it says limited exports here, so maybe because the Germans get free trade, right? These guys get limited exports, so I don't know. I don't know what it's gonna be. Does it say anywhere? What economy law or trade law do you have at start? I don't see anywhere. Well, that's annoying. Anyway, yeah, if you take the Germans, you get free trade. If you take the British, you get limited exports, and I'm guessing that the center one is just maintaining whatever you have at the start. And then, yeah, okay, so taking either of these focuses leads you to, obviously, the fascist side, the democracy side, or the neutral side. And the fascist one, again, you can either be with Germany and appease, essentially, the other fascists and become kind of their, you could say, junior partner. So that would involve having to deal with the Japanese, so that the Japanese get the resources of the Indies. You can either give it to them, or, as he says over here, either giving them outright control of the resource-rich East Indies. I wonder what, you know, payoff you get from that, or simply give them control of the resources there. So you can see there that's a new mechanic, I think. You can give people control of your resources. As you can see there, the Dutch East Indies are pretty Dutch. They're orange, but they have a Japanese flag over them. So I'm guessing that this is a new mechanic. The Netherlands first is essentially about just going nuts and trying to win. So you are trying to unite the Netherlands, and yeah, then you can reclaim your old colonies lost to the British, the French, and the Americans. Now that's pretty ridiculous. The Americans, I'm only thinking about New Amsterdam, so it's like, really now? I wonder how that's gonna even work. The French and the British, that might have to deal with... I have no idea, actually. Might have to deal with some Caribbean islands. And perhaps something in the Far East. Well, like, the only real lost Dutch colony that I know of is Taiwan. But Taiwan is, well, kind of a special case. So I wonder if we can retake Taiwan. That would be interesting. Caving to the British opens up two separate paths of the democracy. You can either do the historical thing and go with Britain, and you get Gerbrandy as a prime minister over there, Little Churchill, and gain extra manpower by instituting the Vaarplicht, which is essentially like conscription for the merchant marine. Or you can... Where is it? God damn it. Or you can form the Benelux and expand it into the European Union. But see, the thing is, it says establishing an alliance of smaller powers in Europe to stand against the meddling major powers, especially Germany and Britain. See, it says the foundations for a European Union to the right side over there. And then the best defense, I'm guessing the best defense might just be an attack on Germany. But like, I wonder if you can make a European Union peacefully. Like an actual EU peacefully, because right now you have to obviously kill everyone and then form the EU, which is, you know, relatively unrealistic, although it's also unrealistic to just, you know, form a European Union peacefully in 1936, but who cares? Like, we want that shit. We want that shit because it's fun to use. Anyway, the other one is to go with Britain, and, you know, that's going to be the one that you want to take if you want to go with the government in exile after being invaded by Germany, I'm guessing, because it's, you know, there's a lot of stuff, I'm guessing, that is gonna just help you with that. And then at the end, you get the fourth ally, so you're technically on par with the UK, the US, and the Soviets. Conveniently leaving out China. Anyway, so... yeah, that's essentially what happens there. And then the commies, it's just like, yeah, you do communism. It's just that. They really focus heavily on, again, making the Netherlands itself a lot more, you could say, valuable, because you're decolonizing, and so your resources are being flown back to the mainland, but other than that, it doesn't seem to be that interesting. Like, maybe you can do a socialist Benelux? I don't know. Because you can still do the unify the Netherlands thing, because it's a decision, I think, right? Is it a decision? Repudiate the Treaty of London. I wonder if to repudiate the Treaty of London, you need to be... you need to be fascist or anything like that, but who knows, who knows. And yeah, there's also allied favors you can get. There's just so many things. You can see why I like this. This is expansive. This is, it's got a lot of flavor. This is, I think, pretty well researched. Now, I do not know absolutely anything about the Netherlands at this period, so I cannot say if it's good or not in terms of the historical accuracy, but it all seems rather good, you know? Also, look at that occupied territories button over there. Interesting. I wonder how that's gonna work. So yeah, and then there's the just the non-aligned part, which is all about essentially depolarizing the Dutch society, so trying to rally everyone behind the Queen. And the pillarization was essentially how, you know, political divisions had started to eat away at national unity. You can read more into that in the diary. And in the end, you actually even get a decision called Bernhard, or a decision category called Bernhard, which is give Bernhard generalship. And this guy, I recognize him from actually Führerreich. He's the leader of the I don't remember, was it National Populist or Valkist? I'm pretty sure it was just National Populist, so the extreme right wing of the Netherlands in Vuurrijk. I wonder what he's going to do. Seems pretty damn good for a general, but who knows? Who knows? Anyway, so that's the end of it. I mean, honestly, it's kind of a shame that this is what the Dutch focus tree feels like, and it's probably a little bit better than the American one. But well, yeah, the Netherlands is a pretty interesting country, and looks like they're going to be very, very fun to play in, you know, upcoming Man the Guns. So yeah, hope you've enjoyed. I'll see you soon. Have a good day.